In defense of pantsing. First off, who named this anyway? Like, you can sound entirely reputable if you say that you are plotting a novel. You cannot sound reputable if you say that you are pantsing. It's just not possible. I feel 99% certain that it was not the pantsers of the world who came up with the term pantsers. In fact, I can just imagine the conversation where the term came to life. Imagine two writers walking down the street. One is like, "How's your writing coming?" And the other is like, "Well, I've reached page 20 of my outline. How about you?" And the other one is like, "Well, I might have figured out what my story is about." And the plotter is like, "I can't believe you just write by the seat of your pants like that." Yeah, that term was not thought up by a pantser. It was thought up by a plotter. With that in mind, I would like to propose we start using, any other term instead of pantsing. Discovery writing, writing into the dark, gardening, anything that doesn't involve pulling someone's pants down. Please? Pretty please? No more pantsing. Human beings are natural storytellers. Like, this is what makes us human. This is what we were born to do. We tell stories to make sense of the world, and we listen to stories and learn stories to make sense of the world. Humans know how stories work. Don't you know how stories work? Do you really need a 20-page outline or 10,000 word outline to tell you what's going to happen in a story? No matter who you are or what story you're writing, the fact is, we all know a story starts from kind of a comfortable place or a stasis. Tension gets added, the tension builds, the tension comes to a head, and then there's some form of resolution. Now, there are a lot of variations. Maybe you're writing a mystery and your point of stasis at the beginning is actually a dead body lying on the floor. Maybe you're doing some sort of heavy literary fiction and the resolution is everyone going their separate ways and being a little sadder than before. There's a reason I don't really read literary fiction. Maybe you are writing a horror or a thriller and everyone is dead by the end. That can be a resolution. My point is that you don't actually need to write a full outline to know some of the basic plot points, some of the basic beats that you're going to hit. You don't actually have to plot it out. Just a thought. I'm not saying anything against people who want to have it planned out. That's not what this video is about at all. I just want to point out that everyone knows instinctively the story rises and the story falls. You have tension and then you have a release of tension. If you feel like you need to plot that out, that's fine. But if you feel like you can write it without plotting it out, then why plot? I think a lot of it has to do with just having faith in your ability to write the next line and write the next line after that. Dean Wesley Smith is famous for saying, "Well, what do you do when you have writer's block? You write the next line." if you write enough next lines, eventually you have a novel. Who says you can't pants? Who says you can't plot, for that matter? In my experience, it always seems to be the plotters who are saying that you can't write a novel without an outline. Or it's the plotters saying it's a problem that someone is trying to write without an outline. In my experience, it's the pantsers who say, I personally can't write with an outline. I don't think I've ever heard a self-professed pantser tell someone else how they should be writing. But I hear plotters say it all the time. What's up with that? You write how you feel like you need to write. If you feel like you can't write without an outline, then write an outline. Absolutely use an outline. Use that as one of your tools. If you feel that you can't use an outline to write, then don't write with an outline. It should be as simple as that. How is your time best spent? I know that if I decide to outline, I can probably spend a year outlining and world building and laying down all the foundations and never actually get to writing. But even if you can spend a reasonable amount of time outlining, say you spend a month prepping and outlining, and then you spend the next year writing, and then maybe you have a cleaner draft than you would have otherwise, and it takes less time to edit. Or maybe not. Maybe you just added on a month to your entire writing process by writing an outline. I don't know. Different people are different. Maybe by spending a significant amount of time outlining, you save a significant amount of time on writing. Maybe, like I've found, you can outline, but then by the time you actually sit down to write, the story changes as you write, and the outline quickly becomes useless. Accept how it works for you. If you, like me, find that the outline doesn't really save you time, then why waste time on it? Why spend a lot of time outlining when there are probably better ways you can spend that time? As for writing a hopefully cleaner draft, I will once again quote Dean Wesley Smith, who insists that he writes exactly one draft. He will cycle back and edit as he goes, but he doesn't do a second draft. He writes a clean first draft, and that's that. I would be curious how this relates to personality types. If you consider yourself a very intuitive person, are you also more of a pantser? If you feel that you need to plan out everything in your life, are you more of a plotter? I find there are some things that I can't do without planning, and there are some things that I can't plan out. I'd be curious to hear other people's experience. Maybe you plan all of your nonfiction writing, but pants anything fiction. Maybe you carefully plan out your characters, but then pants the plot of your novel. Please do share. Maybe it's intuition, or maybe it's just familiarity. I mean, Stephen King is a well-known pantser, and he has a few years of writing experience. Maybe he's just put in enough time that he's so familiar with the process, he doesn't need to do any plotting. Maybe Dean Wesley Smith has just read enough stories that he's familiar with how he thinks they should go. I'd also be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that experience plays a role? Or do you think some people are just true plotters and will never get away from that? Are some people just true pantsers and they'll never change? Let's talk about a different art form. In music, there are a lot of musicians who insist they could never play without having the music in front of them. But the fact is, there are a lot of very successful musicians who do just that. There are musicians who improvise everything they play. There are musicians who have taught themselves by ear and don't even read music. To some extent, I think it's just different styles of doing it. I think there is an element of however you learn it first is how you will probably be successful going forward. And there's also a certain amount of overcoming fear. The first time you play an improvised solo in a jazz band, that's a scary thing. Maybe the first time you pants a novel is equally scary. Again, I don't want to come across as saying everyone should aim to be a pantser. I don't want to be the person who's preaching that everyone should be doing it a certain way. I'm just saying we should stop saying it's impossible when it is possible. There are people who successfully do this on a daily basis. There are numerous authors who write without an outline, and they are very successful, prolific, well paid, well known. You can't make the argument that it's not possible. It is absolutely possible. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Look at Stephen King. He's had a few successful books. Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, both well-known pantsers. They insist that you sit down and you tell yourself the story. You don't outline it beforehand. I haven't actually read anything by Dean Wesley Smith, but I've heard him talk in quite a few videos and interviews about his process, and he seems very successful. He's written well over 100 books. They've all sold. He makes a living. He never writes a second draft. He never outlines. Somehow it works for him. You do not have to do any particular thing. Find what works for you. All I'm saying is, if you want to, maybe try writing something without an outline. If you want to, see what happens if you write with intuition to guide you instead of planning. If you want to. You don't have to. There is no reason that you have to change anything about your writing style or your system, especially if it works for you. Anyway, that was my thoughts on pantsing versus plotting and a little defense of the former. I hope you're writing. Have a good day. This is my video buddy today. Yes, she is very helpful, as you can see. Very helpful indeed.